Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener. This is a special show about mindful motherhood. Without motherhood, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be on Earth. We wouldn't be talking to each other right now. We wouldn't be doing the great things that Kardec Radio is providing to humanity on Earth. So this show is a great tribute to mothers, but also when we say mothers, we're talking about parents in general. In the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, we have Allan Kardec asking this very question to the illuminated spirits of the time. It's question 582. Can parenthood be considered a mission? And the answer, it is without any doubt a mission, and at the same time a very great duty that involves parents more than they might think concerning their responsibility for the future. God has placed children under the responsibility for the future, under the care of their parents, so that they may guide them on the path of the good, and has facilitated their task by giving children a frail and delicate organization that renders them accessible to all sorts of impressions. However, there are those who are more concerned with training the trees in their orchards and making them produce fine fruit than with training the character of their children. If their children fail due to their neglect, they will have to bear the punishment, and the sufferings of their children will come back to them in a future life because they did not do what was incumbent on them for their children's advancement on the path of the good. Inspirational message such as this one we can find in the Spirit's book in a whole series of questions from 582 onwards in the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, teaching us the spiritual implications of parenthood. Being a parent is not a certificate of maturity. Look at Jesus. He was not a parent in our life, and he was more mature than all of us together. Not in a judgmental way say it this way, but in an invitation. Allan Kardec and Amélie Boudet were not parents, but they were very wise and very mature. We could even say we are their very children, because thanks to their caring and loving, compassionate action in publishing the Spirit's book and other ones, we all have granted a new life. So they are truly our parents. But what is parenthood? How can we be truly mindful, as the Spirits taught Allan Kardec, if we're more concerned about training the trees in their orchards than training the character of our own children? Isn't that what many parents do? They're more concerned about their own professional lives. They're more concerned about the material life. They teach their children about winning the world instead of winning themselves. Aren't we in need of greater enlightenment? And that's why, following the steps of Kardec, today we have the honor to have with us Dr. Cassandra Vinton. She is with us. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, director of research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, co-director of the Mind-Body Medicine Research Group at California Pacific Medical Center Research Institute in San Francisco, California, and the co-president of the Institute for Spirituality and Psychology. Her research focuses on mindfulness approach to cultivating emotional balance, involvement of emotion regulation in addiction and recovery, and the factors, experiences, and practices involved in psycho-spiritual transformation. She has published several academic articles and chapters, has conducted also numerous presentations at international scientific conferences, and is the co-author of Living Deeply, The Art and Science of Transformation in Everyday Life. She is also the author of the book, Mindful Motherhood, which became also a program and a scientific project to understand more the importance of motherhood. We're so honored that she is this morning with us at Kardec Radio, because Kardec Radio is about health, spirituality, the spirit is science, and making us nourish our souls with more well-being. So we need this good news and nourishment for the souls, to know that there are scientists out there, psychologists, people in the healthcare sciences, working day in, day out to understand more about our minds and bring new approaches so we can live better, a more fulfilled life. That's why we are here at Kardec Radio, to bring these amazing people like Dr. Witten to tell us about this good news. We need to know more. As Kardec said, a rational faith is the one that faces reason, the one that is unshakable, is not afraid of facing reason. That's why Spiritism is all about this beautiful marriage of science, religion, and philosophy. They're never going to be divorced, because once they are together, truth is finally brought to the earth in this beautiful combination with different names, through different people, but we are all together. And Kardec Radio is here for you also to answer your questions. If you want to ask us questions, and especially to our guest today, Dr. Witten, please call us at 858-769-4705. After the first 40 minutes of the show, we're going to open the line so you can ask your question, or you can ask your questions through the chat room as well. Just go to blogtalkradio.com/Kardec Radio, or send us an email. We have a few emails here that we're going to read with questions to Dr. Witten and also to Kardec Radio. You can email us at kardecradio@gmail.com or kardecradio@kardecradio.com. It's very simple. And we have beautiful shows lined up throughout the next 3 months. It's beautiful. Many people have been acknowledging Kardec Radio, and Kardec Radio is taking over the United States, 5 more states, and we are pulling the map of the United States of America. Check it out. Go online, kardecradio.com, and find out about the profile of our listeners. Kardec Radio has listeners in more than 45 countries. Can you believe it? We just turned 3 months of existence. But you know, when God has a plan, it works. And that's Kardec Radio here. It's God sent. We are honored to work at Kardec Radio in a beautiful team of collaboration and to kickstart the beautiful and very important show of this morning. We would like to open our hearts a little more with a beautiful inspirational message that came through the Brazilian humanitarian, medium, compassionate heart of Chico Xavier, which is published in the CD Enlightening Messages, published by the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. This track is like a prayer for us. It's like a message to open our hearts a little more. After all, to be a mother, to be a father, to be responsible for the guidance of our lives, it requires that we persist all the more. Let's listen to this and enchant our hearts.
A little more. You are under the impression that you have exhausted the stock of all your resources in a particular work of love. But if you persevere a little more in your devotion, no one can predict the laurels of light that will shine in your path. You are sick and intend to obtain a prolonged leave. But if you persevere a little more in your service, Who can predict the treasure of new energies which will appear in your way? You met huge difficulties in the exercise of good deeds and wish to run away from them. But if you persist a little more in the building of benevolence, who can predict the triumph that your vested hours will collect from the living sources of charity? You believe you cannot tolerate the inopportune friend, the disobedient daughter or son, the thoughtless brother or sister, the fickle wife, or the foolish husband. But if you withstand a little more the difficulties in your household, who can predict the extent of the joy that is to reach your home? You assume that misfortune is your destiny and cry at the door of despair. But if you cultivate a little more fidelity to your own obligations, who can predict the magnitude of your success in the tomorrow which draws closer? You experience enormous fatigue and do not wish to hear a long-winded friend. But if you persevere a little more in your sacrifice, who can predict the fruits from the harvest of blessings that will come from your brief minutes of courtesy? Notice that you too, in the pursuit of anything, demand incessantly a little more goodwill, a little more cooperation, a little more time, a little more kindness from your neighbor. Genius and patience are never ending. It is fair that you wish a little more happiness. For this, it is necessary that you play a helping part in the happiness of others. Be aware of the lessons of life, and you will understand that to be victorious is to work always in accordance with your duty and to serve a little more.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, the show today is about mindful motherhood. It's so important for us to know what to do. How can we empower ourselves to be better parents? Not better than anybody else, but deal with the struggles or the difficulties or times in which parents may be clueless about what to do, new resources. The fact of the matter is nobody undergoes an actual training to be parents. And even if we do, life is going to take us by surprise at moments that no training actually has foreseen the events that may occur. What do we do? The education of Johann Pestalozzi in Switzerland the master of modern education. He taught Allan Kardec, Professor Revile, when he was little. He was sent from France to Switzerland to know about education. After all, besides Spiritism, Allan Kardec was a renowned educator in France, especially in Paris at the time, and he learned the ins and outs of education with Pestalozzi. And Pestalozzi had a very important slogan that to educate children, we needed 3 elements. Work, because certainly it is work. And Pestalozzi was very wise. There is no education of children without work. So if parents are willing simply to play, like we play with toys as we have children, and like, oh my gosh, when they grow up, I don't want to go into that hardship. We need to get mature, because to be parents means work, first and foremost. To be educators in general, even for teachers, we're saying this. We are parents of children as well. When we're educating them, work, inevitably. But then element number 2, Pestalozzi suggested, solidarity. Solidarity, he said, because the fragility of the body that does not allow that millennial soul to express itself due to the impediments of the immaturity of the body. We need to be in solidarity with that soul that is there, wants to express itself but can't, wants to be independent and can't because their circumstances are asking for some time of learning that acquires acquisitions after acquisitions. So we need to be in solidarity. It's not easy. Imagine when we reincarnate again. We know so many things, and then we reincarnate in that little body that containing us. It's great, but at the same time can be frustrating. And you can tell in the eyes of many children, they are feeling those frustrations, even babies. So what do? Feel in solidarity, be patient, be tolerant. And mostly, he finishes with the 3rd inevitable element of a good education, persistence. That's why the prayer, a little more. We need a little more patience, a little more persistence, and a lot more wisdom. That's why we're inviting here to add to the understanding of the Spiritist view, Dr. Cassandra Witten. She is here with us. We're so honored because she is this very experienced licensed clinical psychologist. She's also director of the research at the Institute of Noetic Societies. What an amazing institute. She is co-director with Dr. Astin of the Mind-Body Medicine Research Group at California Pacific Medical Research Center Institute in San Francisco, California, and also co-president of the Institute for Spirituality and Psychology. She has a lot to teach us. And welcome to Kardec Radio, Dr. Witten. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
So, Dr. Witten, we've got to know that in regard to the Mindful Motherhood Project, you started it with your own experience as a mother when you were pregnant. Would you kindly share with us how you got those amazing insights and put together the program that you did? Because many moms go through similar or even more difficult hardships and they don't put together a program like yours.
Well, I am a psychologist, and my background has been in spiritual practices and well-being, and so I was working primarily with alcoholics and drug addicts at the time that I started the program, and we were using mindfulness-based approaches to helping addicts and alcoholics who were trying to quit using and drinking to overcome their cravings and to deal with their experience in a different way. And and then I got pregnant and took some time off and had a baby, and I thought, wow, this mindfulness would be really helpful during pregnancy and childbirth and parenting too, because it helped me. Not that I had a huge amount of trouble, but it's definitely a roller coaster with all of the changes in your body and your mind, your hormones, and childbirth is obviously challenging sometimes. And then postpartum, when you've got lots of sleep deprivation, and it can be, there can be a lot of stressful moments. And so mindfulness is a practice of settling deep within yourself with your experience exactly as it is and allowing it to be as it is and increasing your capacity to stay present and connected with your baby even when either your baby or you are feeling distress or difficulty.
That's so interesting. But when you talk about mindfulness, some people don't understand the concept. What is to be mindful, and why is it so important, not only for the moment of pregnancy and motherhood, but in general?
In this way of using the word mindfulness, what we're talking about is paying attention on purpose in the present moment in a way that is non-judgmental, non-evaluative. It's a way of being with experiences as they arise with an open mind and an open heart and allowing them to simply arise in the field of consciousness and pass away, because as we know, everything that happens in our experience is temporary. Our body sensations, our thoughts, our feelings and emotions, they might hang on for a little while, but in general, most things move through in this endless stream of experiences. And so the difficulty comes in some ways not with the experiences themselves, although some can be very difficult, but it's in our attempts to try to get away from an experience or try to make it last longer, to try to control or suppress our experiences or avoid experiences. So this is a way of resting in awareness, which is one thing that doesn't change. You know, you have awareness. You always have awareness with you, and it's like almost like a vast field of consciousness or a container within which all of your experiences happen. And that awareness can be a very peaceful and compassionate place to be, even when the contents of your experience are agitating or difficult. And so it's helping people get in touch with that field of awareness and resting in that awareness as experiences move through, and then paying attention to what's happening in this moment rather than thinking about the past or projecting into the future, really being here if your baby is, you know, if you've got children or a child or a baby, even when your baby's still inside, paying attention to what's happening in your body and your mind and your feelings and resting with it rather than struggling against it.
That's so interesting, because when we talk about mindfulness, for the people who are not acquainted with the term, especially the lay public, we realize that people are so not present. We may be watching a movie in a movie theater, and our minds are home or at work, or we may be home, maybe nursing the baby, and then our minds are, oh my God, I wish I could be at work finishing that project, or I wish I could be in Hawaii laying on a beach and sunbathing, right? So then you don't get the best elements. And when we talk about becoming an educator as mother and father, being mindful, but how do we get? Because do you think we need some form of training to become mindful? Because it seems so opposite to the fast pace of life, especially in America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have two answers to that question, and the first is yes. It's like learning a language or learning to play a musical instrument or learning any other skill. In some ways, mindfulness is a skill, and as you're saying, it's a skill that is unfamiliar to those of us who, particularly those of us who were raised in a Western culture where the emphasis is on thinking and doing, and there isn't as much emphasis on simply being. And so being is a mode of, doesn't mean that you're never going to employ your mind or, engage in strategies, but that's what we do with 90 to 95% of our time. Or as you said, we're engaging in some kind of distraction. And it's not that we shouldn't do those things, but what mindfulness training does is allows you to get a little bit more comfortable with the being mode, which is just simply resting in awareness in a sort of compassionate and curious and interested way. And So most people do need some training to get used to it because it's very unfamiliar, and you find yourself then easily getting distracted or, finding yourself pretty uncomfortable with just simply being, and so then you seek to busy yourself somehow again. And so in some ways it's just getting used to that being mode. And then on the other hand, I mentioned that we all have this awareness, and so there is an aspect of it that's already naturally mindful. And if you sit with your experience right now, wherever you are, you may be sitting down or lying down or standing up or driving in the car, but bringing your attention to where you are and what your body's feeling. Bringing your attention to the sound of my voice, bringing your attention to what you're seeing and feeling and even what you're thinking. Just by bringing your attention to what you're doing right now is a form of mindfulness. And the interesting thing is just that it's hard to kind of keep our attention on what we're doing now. And it doesn't mean, again, that we should never be distracted or never think about other things. It's just that maybe a little bit less of the time, especially when we're with our children, we can spend more time with our attention in the present moment rather than being distracted or, as you were saying, ruminating, thinking a lot about other stuff.
Yeah, and would you say, as you're talking about our senses, the physical senses, would you say a good strategy then is to use our senses and also our breathing as a way to ground us in the present and go from there?
Yeah, mindfulness practice starts with paying attention to breathing. And so the formal practice of mindfulness, this is if you were learning to play the piano, you would have to practice a half an hour a day maybe. This is that same kind of practice where you sit quietly and observe your breathing and notice that you're breathing. And when you notice that your attention has wandered away from your breathing, you just gently bring it back because that's very natural for the mind to wander. And after you do that for a while and you feel like you might have a little bit of stability where you're able to pay attention to your breathing more than not while you're doing it, then you might start to bring attention to body sensations. And one way that people do it is called a body scan, which is where they start at the head or at the feet. And if they start at the feet, moving their attention slowly up their body, just noticing what's happening in the toes and the feet, and then the ankles and the shins and knees and thighs and so on. And then just scanning all the way up and then back down again and paying attention to what's happening in the body for a period of time, maybe 20 minutes. And if you try these things for the first time, you'll notice that they're pretty hard to do. They're actually
very hard.
Difficult. They can be really uncomfortable. You can say to yourself, why would I want to just sit here paying attention to my breathing or my body? But it's the same thing as, learning to ride a bike. At first, when you practice, you fall off. It's difficult. You say, God, this is not fun. Why do my parents want me to ride a bike? This is terrible. Then when you get the hang of it, you go, oh, this is great. This is really wonderful, and it becomes a refuge for finding peace. And so I really encourage people to be aware that at the beginning, training in mindfulness can be uncomfortable and it can seem meaningless. And over time, as you do this practice of bringing your attention to your breathing and your body sensations, you'll see that it starts to generalize to other parts of your life. So when you're working, you bring more attention to your working, and when you're cooking, you bring more attention to that. When you're engaging in another spiritual practice, you have more attention and energy available to do that. And so in the beginning, it's sort of almost like, just trust me, it'll be helpful.
And as you're just talking about cooking and being mindful, it came to me like as a teaser to the listener, because we can discuss more after another break. But what about those moments when you don't want to be mindful? You want actually to escape away, like your child is like kicking and screaming about something, and you're like, get me out of here. So where would mindfulness get into that moment?
Well, it just depends, because mindful parenting, mindful motherhood isn't about being perfect. If you try to be perfectly mindful the whole time, you'll drive yourself crazy. So the idea is that you can make a choice. So sometimes, if you're swinging your baby on the swing at the park and you absolutely need to make a phone call, you can make a choice. I choose to make a phone call in this moment, and I know that I'm not usually going to do it, but I need to do it right now. Or, say you're in a moment where it's so upsetting or so distressing that you don't want to just say it's the middle of the night and the baby's crying and it's the fourth time they've woken up and maybe they're teething. It's perfectly fine to make a choice to turn on a movie or a video or a music. The difference with mindfulness is that you're actually making a choice. You're not being forced to or driven to by your inability to tolerate what's happening. And so that's really the point of mindfulness, is to provide a platform where you are making choices about your actions that aren't on autopilot. They're not just you reacting based on maybe your childhood programming or society's, stories about how you should be a parent, but instead you're making conscious choices based on your values and the way you want to be a parent and your goals for yourself and for your child. And so if sometimes that choice means that you distract yourself or you distract both you and the baby, that's fine.
That's so interesting. So it's about this awareness of our choices, feelings, thoughts. Dr. Vitin, we're going to give a short break and be back with you because we have a lot to learn.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book And Life Goes On by the Spirit André Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com. Known as one of the most scientific books by Allan Kardec, The Genesis dives deeper into the origins of our planet to the advent of the new generations to come. Purchase your copy today, online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, mindful motherhood, what is it? To be mindful, Dr. Vitin was sharing with us, to be mindful is, to say the least, this practice of being present in the moment, of having our attention in the moment. By using our physical senses, we can ground ourselves right here and now instead of being somewhere else and then not paying attention to what is around us. Also, by paying attention to our breathing is a way for us to become mindful, and that can help motherhood. But how? How can also a father be mindful? Because often we talk about being a mother, but what about the partner with us in this journey? Should they also be mindful, Dr. Vitin?
Well, yeah, everything we've been talking about applies just as well to fathers and to caregivers and aunts and uncles and grandparents. And the program that I put together especially for moms, just because one of the things I noticed in working with women was that when women get together in a group, they can say things to one another that they can't say while their partners are in the room. But I have many colleagues who are teaching mindfulness to couples and to fathers, and it applies just as much as it does to moms. and really to any of our relationships. If we can be mindful with each other in our marriages and in our friendships and in our coworker relationships, it really provides the ideal circumstances to connect with intimacy and to be authentic and to be assertive. One of the things we teach the women in the Mindful Motherhood program is how to communicate your needs with mindfulness. And it's a very simple practice where first you scan your body and you find out what are my body sensations. Then you observe your feelings and emotions. And then you observe your thoughts. And then you simply communicate that to the person you're with. So you can say to even a coworker or a partner or a spouse, I'm feeling my stomach is tight and I'm feeling a little worried and I'm thinking that I'm concerned that perhaps we're not addressing this in the way I want to be addressing it, and I'm wondering if we can talk more about it. And it's amazing that just by telling people what your body's feeling, what your emotions are feeling, and what you're thinking, honestly, without saying anything else about them or what should happen, it opens the door to communication, and it often makes your needs much more clear to you.
That's so interesting because, for example, I come from a generation in which, for example, fathers were, though marvelous, they were requested to be providers, and they had little time to actually be present, and they usually paid little attention to the children's needs, or not in case of my father, but the generations ago, and we can tell that this has been diluted within the new generation, and you can tell that though the person is not the child-bearing, the partners in general, being either a father or another mother, because things are changed, or father with father, in a very different world we're living in today, very open. They are both so much more fully present and paying attention to the child's needs. So practical tips, can we practice, because you have the program on mindful motherhood, are there exercises? How can people who are listening to the show right now get a hold of the benefits of the program you put together and the new findings of science as well in regard to mindful motherhood?
Well, one thing you can do is go to the Mindful Motherhood website, which is mindfulmotherhood.org, and that has a whole lot of resources. It has a downloadable MP3 mindfulness meditation, guided meditation, that you can download and put on your computer or your iPod and burn a CD of it if you like, and practice mindfulness using the guided meditation. There are a lot of resources and links on that website as well. And then the Mindful Motherhood book for pregnant women and early moms is available at Amazon.com, and it's called Mindful Motherhood, Practical Tools for Staying Sane During Pregnancy and Your Child's First Year. And then there are lots of mindfulness resources on the Internet. So if you just put in mindfulness guided meditation, say you want one that's maybe not particularly for new moms, but you'd like to practice it yourself in some other way, just put mindfulness meditation or mindfulness guided meditation into your search engine, and you'll find lots of guided meditations on the Internet that you can practice with, and wonderful books that you can read to get more knowledge about mindfulness. And there's really a huge amount of interest now in mindfulness in the health and healing professions and in education for children. So lots of mindfulness being integrated into school curricula, and almost every major medical center includes some kind of mindfulness-based stress reduction program. So you can go to your local medical center and see if they have something called mindfulness-based stress reduction and take an 8-week class that will help you train in this skill of mindfulness.
That's very interesting, very practical too. But what would be the science? Can science already tell us something in regard to either the benefits physiologically, psychologically, and even spiritually of some sort, of being mindful in that regard of when you're a parent, and the opposite, the possible implications of non-mindfulness as well.
Well, we did a study when we developed the Mindful Motherhood program, and we taught it to 5 groups of women, and we did a small randomized controlled trial where some women who were pregnant received the intervention during their pregnancy, which was an 8-week training class in mindfulness, and other women got it after their babies were born, and we gave it to them after their babies were about 3 months old. So we got to look at the difference between the experience of women who got the training versus didn't get the training in pregnancy, and what we found was that women who got the training reduced their negative emotion, increased their positive emotions, and they had less anxiety. And so it was a small study, but it was quite promising, and now we're in the midst of a much larger 5-year study in San Francisco where we're using a mindfulness-based program to encourage healthy behaviors and healthy weight gain during pregnancy and healthy nutrition and stress reduction. So we are in the process now of testing the effects of the training on pregnant women, and it's wonderful work to do this training with women who are at one of the most important times in their lives, getting ready to become a mom. There's also a lot of scientific research that supports the efficacy of mindfulness in all kinds of other settings. So it was originally the MBSR, or mindfulness-based stress reduction program, was developed for people with chronic pain, and it does help people deal with chronic pain, anxiety, depression. It's been shown to enhance immunity and to change brain function in a positive way. And so there's a growing body of scientific evidence that learning this skill seems to have a number of benefits for people.
Dr. Witten, we received this week an email of Chris from Colorado telling us about the interest on your show, and she preferred to email us one of the questions that probably pertain to this very moment of the show, which is about what does science say in regard to the importance of prenatal stress of mothers? Mothers who are so stressed out, and the impact in the life that is being gestated in the early years of life.
Well, there is a whole body of evidence showing that stress during pregnancy can increase risks for negative childbirth outcomes and for having a less than optimal fetal environment. And so there can be decreased blood flow to the uterus and early birth, low birth weight, and there are even some studies showing that too much stress during pregnancy can alter the way that the baby develops into their own childhood and adulthood. So difficulties with cognitive development and difficulties with their own stress reactivity after they're born. And this is not to put a big guilt trip on pregnant women who are facing stress, because it's not a direct prediction. If you're experiencing stress as a pregnant woman, you aren't necessarily hurting your baby, but anything you can do to reduce stress during pregnancy is helpful, because we know that stress can have negative outcomes. And so that was one thing that was very interesting to us. It's part of what inspired us to create this program, was to enhance the fetal environment while babies are developing, and then also to provide a better platform for parenting. So the idea was to, use the training to decrease stress during pregnancy, and then after the baby's born to enhance the ability to parent in a way that is healthy.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And would you say that by being non-mindful, we would also create, I remember when, I'm going to ask this question because I remember doing our own research at the University of Maryland on the neonatal events that implicated in changes later on in life, not only at psychological behavioral level, but also in regard to the changes of the neural pathways related to pain, anxiety, and depression. Would you say that also one of the implications of being mindful is because it can prevent, for example, some types of these disorders that may appear later on in life?
Yeah, I mean, that would be the theory. There are studies underway now looking at whether mindfulness training can help with attention deficit disorder and things like that. And we don't know quite yet what the long-term effects of training in mindfulness during pregnancy might be on those outcomes, but there are beginning to be some studies. One of the things we'll be doing in our current study is looking at babies at 1 year old. So we'll look at women who received the mindfulness training during pregnancy and follow their babies out until they're at least 1 year old. And so we'll be able to look at some of the outcomes there. But the theory and the hypothesis is that mindfulness training won't just have kind of the effects of peace and stress reduction that is experienced. You know, that would be a great benefit in and of itself, but might also have beneficial physical effects.
That's very interesting. There is a lot to learn for sure. In these, certainly long-term studies are needed to verify, so it's certainly going to take a while to verify much more in regard to the trainings that you're saying. But would you say the first that we can tell that even science vouches for the fact that the first years of life are so critical in regard not only to the formation of the personality, but to the physical health as well of the person who is born?
I think it's fair to say that we know now that the way the baby's brain develops is in an experience-dependent fashion, and what that means is that it depends on the experiences the baby has in the world. So you come in with genetics, and you come in with biology, and in some ways some things are hardwired. But then most of what happens in your brain development and in your body development interacts with the environment. And so it's through thousands of interactions with parents and grandparents and caregivers in that first few years of life that determines what neural pathways are laid down for the rest of someone's life. So the good news is that it is thousands of interactions. So, you can't make, you can make some mistakes. Sometimes you're not going to do it right. Sometimes you're going to get upset, or you're going to miss something, or you're going to fail, in little ways as a parent, and that's just expected. But if you can make most of the interactions ones that are positive, compassionate, curious, where you're really present, you're attuned with the baby, you're sort of, they call it attachment, so you're in some ways in this parent-baby dance where you're really paying attention to their facial expressions and to their body, because they can't talk yet, right? So you've got to communicate, and they don't really understand what you're saying. So you're communicating through your face and through your body. And if you're present in your body and in your being, and you're paying attention to what's happening in the moment, you're going to, number one, have a lot more accurate responding, and number two, you're just going to have a lot more energy for everything that comes up.
We just talked about this learning experience of the relationships in our life that we're modeling when we're little, and it reminds us now of a story that we have prepared to show in this program. At this very moment, when we want to reframe or help also our listener to reframe this relationship from a more spiritual perspective as well. The training of mindful motherhood also to boost these, let's say, connection at the spiritual level, and to exemplify what we mean. We're going to show to our listener now, Dr. Vitin, just bear with us. It's 2.5 minutes. Then we go to a break, come back, about this mother and son. It's a very interesting story. Of course, there is some form of drama and tragedy there, but it's a true account that happened in the 19th century, and we want to discuss this relationship from also a spiritual perspective between mother and child. Give us just a moment, Dr. Vita, we'll be back with you to learn more from you as well. Dear listener, please listen to this very compelling case that asks us to reframe what it is that we're doing when we took the responsibility of being parents.
From the book Heaven and Hell, Chapter 5, Part 2, Mother and Son. In March of 1865, Mr. C., a businessman in a small town close to Paris, had at home his seriously ill 21-year-old son. Sensing that his time had come, this young man called to his mother and still had enough strength left to embrace her. Sobbing, she said to him, "Go ahead of me, my son, for I won't be long in following you." Having said this, she left the room, hiding her face in her hands. The persons who witnessed this contrite scene thought Mrs. C's words were a simple outburst of grief that time and reason would dispel. After the young man died, they searched for her throughout the house and then found she had hanged herself in the barn. Both mother and son were buried at the same time. The son was evoked several days later, and the evocation went like this. "Did you know that your mother committed suicide out of despair over losing you? Yes, and were it not for the sorrow her fatal decision had caused me, I would be perfectly happy. Poor excellent mother, she couldn't bear the trial of a temporary separation, and so that she could be with her beloved son, she took the road that will lead her farthest from him, alas, and for a long, long time. So she delayed a reunion for who knows how long, but which would have been near at hand if her soul had submitted to the will of the Lord, if she would have resigned herself, humble and repentant, before the trial she had to undergo, the expiation that would have purified her. Oh, pray, pray for her, and especially you mothers who are moved by the story of her death. Do not follow her example. Do not believe that she loved her son, her pride and joy, more than other mothers love theirs. No, she did not love him more. She lacked courage and resignation. You mothers listening to me, when agony forces your son's eyes to close, remember that, like Christ, they are mounting Calvary, and from there they shall rise to eternal glory. Benjamin C.
We will return to our program after these messages.
If you have any questions or comments, please call Kardec Radio at 858-769-4705.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Louise, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, everything about mindful parenthood and motherhood, fatherhood, it's all about empowering ourselves to be happy parents, happy in the sense of fulfilled, knowing that we're learning, and challenges are part of life. After all, we're reincarnated to grow. And in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, there is this passage, chapter 14, and the first items, this is actually item 9. Beautiful. It's a chapter about the better understanding of what it is to be honoring father and mother. And there is a part of it that it says the task of being parents is not as difficult as you might think. However, It does not require the wisdom of the world. The uneducated as well as the learned can fulfill it, and Spiritism has come to facilitate it by making known the cause of the imperfections of the human heart. From infancy, children manifest the good or the bad instincts they have brought from their previous existence, and it is necessary that we apply ourselves to studying them. And then this very interesting spirit, St. Augustine, through the mediums of the time, said, "Do as good gardeners, who cut off the defective shoots as soon as they appear on the tree. If selfishness and pride are allowed to develop, do not be surprised if you're paid back later with ingratitude. When parents have done everything they should for their children's moral advancement, but are unsuccessful nonetheless, they have nothing to reproach themselves, for and their conscience can rest easy." So, dear listeners, what do we do when times are difficult? We try our best, or we think we're trying our best. First thing we want to ask every listener, ask this question: why have I become a parent? Because the motive has everything to do with the hardships. Have we done it just like, as instinctive as for any other animal in the animal kingdom? We go there, get married, boom, have a child, just because we think, oh well, we have to have a child. We haven't planned, we haven't thought very carefully, so problems certainly are going to surprise us. Or, as some people told me, oh, it's a certificate of maturity. Or, as other people have shared also with us, I'm worried about when I get older, so I need to have children so they care for me. Quite interesting. These reasons certainly, or I'm alone, I want a child to fill in the gap of my loneliness. These seem to be not the very right reasons to have a child, and then most certainly, in such cases, we're not very well prepared. But is there a way to prepare ourselves better? Dr. Cassandra Witten is honoring us at Kardec Radio with her presence this morning. She is the licensed clinical psychologist who is also a director of research at the Institute of Noetic Societies, co-director of the Mind-Body Medicine Research Group at California Pacific Medical Center Research Institute in San Francisco, California, and co-president of the Institute for Spirituality and Psychology. Dr. Witten, talking about spirituality, how do you think spirituality, and what have you observed in your studies, in your research, of the possible positive impact of spirituality in motherhood, for example?
Well, one of the studies that I've been working on recently is called the Spiritual Engagement Project, and this one was not a study of mothers. It was a study of people who were engaging in different kinds of spiritual practices in their own lives, and we followed people for a year to find out how their engagement impacted their stress and their coping, their health and well-being. And in general, research shows that spiritual engagement is associated with better health. But people don't really know why this might be. They don't know if it's that people have a better community or if it's something about the spirituality itself. And as research has been unfolding over time, it appears that there is something not just about having a group of supportive people around you or having, maybe a church or something that can help drive you to doctor's appointments and, kind of those explanations for why the association is there. But there may be something about the actual spiritual involvement. And one of the pathways through which it may be helpful is through reductions in stress, because we know that when people feel safer, when they feel if they do have a God in their lives, so if they feel close to God or they feel that they're being sort of cared for on a larger level, that their stress is less. even when people have a spirituality that doesn't include a necessarily a benevolent God, but it does include connecting with a source of peace that is within, there's also reductions in stress throughout the day because they take things less personally. Maybe somebody cuts them off on the freeway and they don't get as angry. They think, hey, that's just someone who's doing their best as well. And so the same thing, I think, in motherhood and parenting, that if you have a spiritual source that is kind of sustaining you, that is a resource that you can draw upon when you're in those very difficult times that can happen as a parent, then it allows you to be more in alignment with your values and your goals and to make decisions about how to respond to situations that are the highest, kind of from your highest self. The Spiritual Engagement Project, we are just now finishing the analysis and writing up the paper that will report the results. So I would say to go back to the project website from time to time, and we'll post the results there. The other thing I would suggest is that people go to noetic.org, which is the website of the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And the Institute of Noetic Sciences has been studying spirituality and consciousness and healing and prayer and meditation for nearly 40 years now. So there is a wealth of information on that website. It's noetic.org, and that's where the Mindful Motherhood program is in part based. But there are all kinds of other studies on interconnectedness and spirituality and consciousness and its role in our everyday lives, its role in the physical world and in health and well-being.
All right. Dr. Witten, we are so honored to have you here. We're going to continue the program for a little more, but before you go, please, if you can just share your final thoughts for this show today, hoping that you can come back in the future and tell us more about the great research you have been doing. In regard to mindful motherhood, what would be your suggestions to our public who is listening to us?
Well, I would say that my take-home message would be to spend at least a few minutes every day in whatever kind of contemplative practice that is comfortable for you, whether it's the mindfulness practice that we just described, where you're spending time being aware of your breathing and your body sensations and finding things on the internet. But you can also engage in whatever form of contemplative practice works for you. I just worked with a group of 350 people who are teaching a contemplative practice called centering prayer, which is not just attending to the breathing in the body, but it's attending to the presence of God in your life. And to take that few minutes every day, and even a few times a day, if you're a parent and even if you're not a parent, to rest in that deep awareness and in that being mode that we talked about, that is not the thinking mode and it's not the doing mode. It's not just watching TV or listening to the radio. It's just sitting and quietly paying attention to the present moment and kind of gathering your resources. And if you can learn to do that throughout each day, then it becomes an integrated part of your life. And that makes all the difference. Just that one thing alone, being with your experience in a loving and compassionate way with open mind, open heart, several times a day makes a big, big difference. And one of the things that people are doing recently that I've heard of is setting a little alarm on your phone or on your watch. And every time the alarm goes off, maybe once an hour or 5 times a day, you take that few minutes for some mindfulness practice.
Oh, that's wonderful. Dr. Witten, please receive a big spiritual hug from all of us in gratitude for your time, and we wish you many blessings in this very, we would say in our own words, missionary work you're leading in the research field and especially in the program of mindful motherhood. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So, dear listener, we were honored with so many beautiful and important tips that Dr. Witten shared with us. And let us now, right before the last break, we showed the case of mother and son from the book Heaven and Hell by Kardec. When we talk about mindful motherhood, we are also reminding everyone that this is not about being so mindful that we want to become fully centered in our children. Because remember, our children are not ours. They were given to us, as Kardec instructed us in the Spirit's book, as a mission to guide them. We cannot play the roles of attached parents. Being mindful is different from being attached. Like this mother whom we heard in the book Heaven and Hell. She was there, so mindful, but at the same time, she forgot that being mindful does not mean being attached. She was so attached to the son that when he was about to die, she goes and kills herself, thinking that she's going to be there in the afterlife with the son. Why? Why are we so attached? So we need to learn what happened to her in the afterlife. It's not only the lesson about suicide, but it's about the lesson of being detached. We need to learn to love our children without being attached to them. It's a very tricky learning, but it's a most needed as well. So do you want to know what happened to this mom after she cut her life short? We're going to listen to it now. This is a beautiful evocation. So there she is. For those who haven't been able to hear the whole story in the previous session, she was there by her son's bedside. The son was very terminally ill, about to die, and she goes to the other room and kills herself, willing to be there in the afterlife with him because she couldn't be by herself or away from the child. What happened to her in the afterlife? And let's listen to also what the wiser spirits understand of it. Let's listen to it now.
And so the evocation of the mother went something like this. I want to see my son. Do you have the power to deliver him to me? They are so cruel. They took him from me to lead him into the light while they left me in the darkness. I want him. I want him. He belongs to me. So isn't a mother's love worth anything at all? Well, isn't it? I carried him in my womb for 9 months. I nursed him, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood. I guided his first steps. I taught him to utter the sacred name of God and the sweet word mother. I molded him into a man full of energy, intelligence, honesty, uprightness, and filial love. Just to lose him when he was about to fulfill my hopes for him? Just when a shining future was opening up before him? No, God is not just. He is not a God for mothers, for he does not understand their pain and desperation. And when I bring death upon myself in order not to be separated from my child, they steal him from me again. My son, where are you? And so the evoker says, poor mother, we sympathize with your grief. Nevertheless, you sought a sad recourse to reunite yourself with your son. Suicide is a crime in God's eyes, and you must know that he punishes every infraction of his laws. Being kept from seeing your son is your punishment. And so the mother replies, no, I thought that God was better than men. I didn't believe in his hell. I believed in the eternal reunion of souls who love each other the way we did. But I was wrong. God is neither good nor just, because he has not understood the enormity of my grief and my love. Oh, who can give me back my son? Have I lost him forever? Mercy, mercy, my God. And the evoker responds, now try not to despair so. Remember, if there is a way to see your son, it is not in blaspheming God as you are doing. Instead of attracting his mercy, you will bring about an even greater penalty. And the mother replies, they told me I wouldn't ever see him again, and I understand that they were taking him off to paradise. And am I in hell then? The hell for mothers? It does exist. I see it so well. The evoker responds to the mother, saying this: your son is not lost forever. Believe me, you will certainly see him again. But you must deserve it by submitting yourself to God's will, whereas in rebelliousness you can delay that moment indefinitely. Listen to me. God is infinitely good, but also infinitely just. He never punishes without cause. And if while you were on the earth you were afflicted with great pain, it was because you deserved it. Your son's death was a test of your resignation. Unfortunately, you failed it while alive, and now, after your death, you are failing it again. Do you expect God to reward His rebellious children? God is not implacable. He always welcomes the repentance of the guilty. If you had accepted with resignation and humility the trial God sent you through a momentary separation, and if you had waited patiently for the time when He would have taken you from this earth, then at the entrance of the world you now find yourself in, you would have immediately seen your son coming towards you with open arms. You would have had the joy of seeing him radiant after that time of absence. But what you did, and what you are still doing at this moment, has placed a barrier between you and him. Don't believe that he is lost in the depths of space. No, he is closer than you think, but there is an impenetrable veil concealing him from your sight. He can see you. He loves you always, and mourns the sad condition you have fallen into because of your lack of trust in God. He eagerly waits for the happy moment when he will be allowed to show himself to you. However, it depends only on you to hasten or delay that moment. Pray to God and say with me, Dear God, forgive me for having doubted your justice and goodness. If you have punished me, I realize I have deserved it. Please accept my repentance and submission to your holy will. And the mother responds, What a light of hope you have just shined in my soul. It is like a shining light in the night surrounding me. Thank you. I will pray. Goodbye. And final thoughts from the evoker. Death, even by suicide, did not produce in this spirit the delusion that she was still alive. She was perfectly aware of her state. For others, however, their punishment consists exactly in the delusion that they are still alive, which is caused by the ties that keep them bound to their body. This woman wanted to leave the earth in order to follow her son into the next life. So she had to be aware that she was actually in that world in order to be punished by not finding him there. Her punishment consists in knowing that she does not live corporeally anymore, and in being aware of her situation. Thus, each wrong is punished according to the circumstances that accompany it, and there are no invariable uniform punishments for wrongs of the same kind.
Dear listener, this is the reality. It's like gravity, we often say. Can't fight against the laws of life. Of course, when the Spirit say the word punishment and crime, it's just a way of expressing it. It means we are going against the flow of love. That's what crime is. Before the laws of God, if we don't love, we are against the law of love. Then, of course, we name it criminal, but it doesn't have that heaviness. And when say punishment, it just means like we're going to, atone and suffer. Of course, we can reframe these words, knowing that at the time in the 19th century, these words were very much used at the time. But what it all means, because Spiritism is so compassionate. It's about love, it's about charity and compassion. It's not about punishment. When we talk about family, the reality is such that being mother and father, of course, is not a piece of cake, because it's about learning too. It's teaching and it's learning. Learning, loving, and service, as say the mentors Joseph and Livia. And in that regard, what if we are bearing a child that we know we haven't been good friends in previous lives? We can feel it. What do we do? When we realize, as I've seen cases in which the father looked at a 3-year-old son and said, I know in previous lives we're not good friends because this guy, I can't stand him. 3-year-old child. And you can tell there are struggles. So then the Spirit Ernest O'Brien, from the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, through Chico Xavier and Valdovir's hands, when they're traveling in the United States of America, this was a message brought about family. Tremendous surprise takes place in our mind at the moment of death. Contrary to our former opinions, we are alive. The body came back to the inorganic kingdom as subject of universal change, and we recognize that death is a rebirth. Dissolution occurs in the form, but the soul is the same. The spirit rises from the deserted brain and thus becomes a new being. During this transformation, physical sensation would call us back. While this is happening, the conscience awakes. Then we must run through our accounts. Many times we have run up a lot of debts which need to be paid. We do not always account for our mistakes. The karmic law knows everything about it, and these debts are carried forward to balance our next existence. Because of this, we shall return by means of a new birth. Generally, we are born again among those who are our own enemies of the past, in order to face them and overcome old offenses. Sometimes they reappear in our home under different forms, and they are called father or mother, son or daughter, husband or wife, friends or neighbors. The possibility of re-equilibrium is restored. Love's practice opens the doors to understanding. If mistakes were made yesterday, we need to correct them today. Reincarnation brings enlightenment about dislikes and the sudden hostilities in family circles that apparently have no sense. For this reason, we have in our earthly home a school of self-redemption in which suffering accomplishes its fulfillment. Obstacles in a family may be the way where love guides to better living, for patience gives strength. Not only discipline in a family is essential, but a home demands that you become unselfish and have consideration for others. These things cannot be accomplished by promises in this place. This achievement is realized in the silence of the soul, in its desire to assure happiness to its own relatives. Be mindful of charity in your own house. Make use of the advantages of the passing moment. Almost always you find yourself in a family to work out self-purification. Do not postpone it. You will have to give account of life. The opportunity is at hand. Try to love and to forgive in your home. All the more, if you're doing this, you'll be able to say, I won. This is a message from the Spirit Ernest O'Brien through the hands of Chico Xavier, published in the book Among Brothers of Other Lands. And you can acquire this book at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, on e-format, or in the print-out format, or at the website of the United States Spiritist Council, spiritist.us, or directly from EDICI of America, EDICI of America.com. Amazing books, because we're talking about family. It's very easy to talk about mindful parenthood if we don't have struggles between the souls that are educating and being educated. But most likely, the reality is that we're in front of those that we have to learn to love. We struggle. So what do? Go read the chapter, item 9 of chapter 14 in the Gospel According to Spirit. The Spirit St. Augustine tells quite clearly why and how we can do this better job of being missionaries. As parents, remember, you're a parent, you're in a mission. And by the way, for the Spiritist mothers and fathers, if you're expecting a child, go to the Spiritist Center. Because in the center, you're going to be stronger to face your mission. When your child is born, keep coming to the Spiritist Center. Because if you don't have time to nourish your soul in a spiritual center, in a Spiritist Center, you won't be strong enough to hold on to your mission as a parent. Many parents I've seen that when they have a newborn, they await years to come back. Bring your child. Learn to control your child in that environment and get stronger as well. We're saying this because as in our generations, our parents were spiritists. They're very wise. They brought all of us, not only one or two, but 5 in my personal case. We were 5, and my parents taught us to come to a Spiritist Center, sit down, listen, while they were listening and learning. And we assure you, it's a much wiser form of educating children if we bring also to our own selves as parents new nourishment for the soul. So to close these moments of true reflection on the power of being family, of the importance of being family, and acknowledging the new life that is coming, let us go to the end of the Gospel. Chapter 28, a collection of Spiritist prayers. And let us now get to know that there is a prayer for a newborn child. In the introduction, Allan Kardec says, spirits reach perfection only after having passed through the trials of corporeal life. Those in the spirit world wait for God to allow them to take up another existence that will furnish them a means of advancement, either through the expiation of their past wrongs, by means of the struggles they must endure, or by fulfilling a mission that is useful to humankind. Their advancement and future happiness will be proportional to the manner in which they will have employed the time they must spend on the earth. The job of guiding their first steps and of directing them toward the good is entrusted to their parents, who will answer to God for the way they will have fulfilled their mandate. It is in order to facilitate its execution that God made parental and filial love a law of nature, a law that is never violated with impurity. And Kardec provided us 3 different prayers that we can say by the parents themselves or by other people who would like to wish the best for the life that is just born, reborn, better saying. Let us now pray for all those who are being born today, now, in the future, and bless the ones that were born in the past as well. So, prayer to be said by the parents. Spirit who has incarnated in the body of our child, be welcome among us. Almighty God, who has sent it to us, may you be blessed. It is a deposit that is entrusted to us, and for which we must render an accounting someday. If it belongs to the new generation of good spirits who are populated the earth, we thank you, O God, for such a favor. If it is an imperfect soul, our duty is to help it progress on the path of the good through our counsels and our good examples. If this child falls into evil because of us, we'll be answerable to you, or will not have fulfilled our mission on its behalf. Lord, uphold us in your task and give us the strength and will to fulfill it. If this child must be the subject of a trial for us, may your will be done. Good spirits who have come to preside over its birth and who are to accompany it during its life, do not forsake it. Keep from this child, wicked spirits who may try to induce it to evil. Give it the strength to resist their suggestions and the courage to patiently and resignedly bear the trials awaiting it on earth. Then, dear listener, the blessings of being trusted by God with this mission of being parents. Let us take it with the utmost awareness, being mindful, being good gardeners, as say St. Augustine. And as Dr. Witten shared with us, there are lots of resources already out there. Go to her website, mindfulmotherhood.com, and we send at this very moment our true gratitude to her for everything she has been doing to promote wellness on the earth as a researcher, as a psychologist. As the manual says, they are the ministers of God on earth, scientists, especially like Dr. Witten. And we would like to wish you many blessings during your life on earth and in the afterlife as well. Next week we have also a most special show. Come back and listen, because it's all about spirituality for children. We're going to have 3 guests. Lane Mitchell from California talking about the beautiful project on emotional education at onionhead.com, and also the adorable couple, Gabi Ferreira, and also her husband, Naur Fonseca. Join us next week, Saturday at 11 a.m. Thank you so much, and God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.